about running? Energy! It can be uplifting. That human connection that we create on the broadcast every night is incredibly important.
When it comes to the money you spend every day, we have you covered every morning. Making money makes sense. Weekdays on CBS Mornings.
Investigators work to determine what motivated a gunman to open fire in a dance hall.
Why do we have so many guns in this country?
Or classified material discovered at one of President Biden's Delaware homes over the weekend.
I can think of no reason why the president should have taken home as a senator or as vice president any classified documents.
President Biden is set to choose Jeff Zients to serve as his next chief of staff.
Do you believe he should announce his re-election campaign in the coming weeks?
I expect him to, and I said I would support him if he does.
A memorial site in suburban Los Angeles is growing in size. The means by which that memorial site became necessary is now becoming clearer. A semi-automatic handgun with an extended clip of ammunition. The motive behind the massacre, however, remains elusive. Welcome to Red and Blue. I'm Major Garrett in Washington. We thank you very much for joining us. We begin tonight with the nation reeling from yet another mass shooting. At least 11 people were killed, 9 more wounded, at a Lunar New Year celebration in Monterey Park, California, Saturday night. Police say the suspected gunman took his own life Sunday following a lengthy manhunt. Authorities are still trying to establish a motive for this savage attack. President Biden ordered flags flown at half-staff at the White House to honor the victims. For more on this, Weijia Jiang and Scott McFarland join us now. Weijia is a CBS News senior White House correspondent. Scott is a CBS News congressional correspondent. Weijia, to say we go through this with some pitiful regularity is to almost state a cliche, but it is true. Every White House in modern American history has grappled with this. President Biden is no stranger to this. The atmosphere at the White House?
Well, I think you're exactly right. And every time this happens, we hear the same message from the White House. In this case, it is that more has to be done, that Congress has to pass gun reform. And unfortunately, there is very little that the president himself can do. And he has already done what he can with executive actions. So he, again, is calling for lawmakers to do something. But to your point, Major, as you very well know, time and time again, they have failed to do something that is really sweeping and meaningful when it comes to these guns on the street. And so at this point, you're right. I think there's some fatigue when people hear about this, that, oh, it's another one, because this is what, more than 30th mass shooting.
36th so far the month of January on this 22nd day.
Exactly. So I think there's a frustration at the White House. The president has expressed that. He worked on this for decades as a senator, and, nothing has changed with regard to how much they can actually do, because there is just so much division about how to handle guns.
And Scott, very quickly to you on this, with the House Republican majority, almost zero appetite for anything that would fall under the category of gun reform. True?
Only things that can pass this Congress are things that can thread that very narrow needle. Things where the Republican House and Democratic Senate can get together. This is most certainly not one of those issues. You'll recall the last Congress. Democrats controlled the House and Senate, and they passed what some people say was the biggest gun reform legislation in 30 years, and what others would say was still only incremental, incentivizing some red flag laws, maybe expanding some background checks. Not only is there little prospect for gun reform legislation in this divided Congress, the U.S. House hasn't even organized itself. Its committees aren't fully formed. There's no mechanism to launch a major piece of legislation, at least at this moment.
One of the big stories in Washington, as you both know, and Weijia, I want to ask you about this, is the ongoing document saga, which has an ongoing nature driven in part by a lack of visible transparency from the White House. More revelations about more documents, and now it feels as if Democrats on Capitol Hill have sort of reached a level of fatigue, to use that word again. I want to play a soundbite for you and Scott from the weekend's talk shows. Let's roll that.
Just hard to believe that in the United States of America we have a former president and a current president. They're basically in the same situation. How does this happen?
To think that any of them ended up in boxes in storage one place or the other is just unacceptable.
We need to get to the bottom of what happened, why and when, to understand everything, and in a broader sense to make sure that no White House, no administration is ever able to handle classified documents this way and take them out of the White House from a classified setting.
How's that landing over at the West Wing, Weed?
You know, I think it's getting harder and harder to defend President Biden and to defend what has happened here, which is why you're seeing, you know, prominent Democrats saying that they can't do that
In
anymore.
the early stages, Democrats were ready to stand on the ramparts.
Of course.
Not anymore.
Because we're getting drip, 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 sorry to use that phrase, but it really feels like that, more documents. So it's not one time, it's not two times, it's now 5 times, and we don't know exactly how many pages. And the White House is focusing so much on what the president and his team did after the fact. After they were discovered, he's fully cooperating. He's doing the right thing. But they're really struggling to answer why these documents ended up where they did in the first place, especially when, you know, President Biden himself stresses that he takes the handling of classified material so carefully. And so, you know, President Biden, you know that sometimes he says things that his comms team does not want him to. Last week, he chimed in on this. He said he has no regrets. He also said that there is no there, which begs the question, you know, why is he chiming in on the conclusion of this investigation? Why is he saying he has no regrets if these documents, you know, were at his office, at his home, when they're not supposed to be? And, you know, I think Democrats are saying the least he could do, at least that's what we heard from Joe Manchin here, was to fess up to it, to own up to it, not fess up, but to own up to it, to say this was a mistake and I'll do better. And that's not happening, which, again, to your original question, is why it's harder to go to bat for him.
Scott, it's not uncommon for Senator Joe Manchin of West Virginia sometimes to say things musically attuned to congressional Republicans. They must have thought he's really in tune when he says President Biden and President Trump are in the exact same position. Democrats have been arguing the counter for the better part of 2 weeks on this.
This is complicated, the political calculus for Democrats in the Senate and in the U.S. House. Major, from our latest reporting, it's becoming clear the House Oversight Committee will take the lead on investigating this for Congress. Their chairman, James Comer, today also asked the Secret Service to hand over any visitors' logs from the president's personal residence as they expand their investigation. The Oversight Committee had long pledged it was going to take the lead on investigating Hunter Biden, but now, unexpectedly, this investigation seems to have taken prominence and ascendancy in the committee's to-do list. But there's something deeper at play here, and I think we just touched on it. There's almost a metastasizing problem here. It's not just an issue of classified records. Now it's an issue of messaging and transparency, which gives Republicans a lot more to work with as they investigate and gives Democrats an awful lot more to answer for.
And we at the White House, this is an important development. There'll be a new chief of staff in February. Jeff Zients will take the place of Ron Klain. Explain.
That's right. You know, this isn't necessarily a surprise. Ron Klain has already been there for over 2 years. We expected him to depart earlier than this. And Jeff Zients is already someone who the president trusts, because you'll remember he was the COVID coordinator who implemented the vaccine program. And so that will be his role as he takes over the White House, is the implementer. Implementate. Can you help me for a second?
Implementer.
Implementer, yes. Sorry. It just wouldn't come out because that's what he's good at. Mm-hmm. And, you know, Ron Klain was there to help pass all these monster pieces of legislation, infrastructure, the Inflation Reduction Act, and now it will be Zients who takes the baton to actually see them through. Sources tell me that what's different is that Ron Klain is a trusted confidant of President Biden's for decades. Mm-hmm. They've worked together so closely. Zients is not part of that ironclad inner circle. And therefore, while he has this role and his title is, you know, chief of staff, the people who are members of that inner circle will have a more prominent role, especially as they launch the re-election campaign, which we're expecting at any time. So Anita Dunn, Steve Ricchetti, Bruce Reed, these are the people that will really fill in the gaps that Ron Klain leave behind because they don't have that trust that, you know, Klain and Biden had for so long.
Right. Chief of staff, but with many helping with political antennae and other matters.
Exactly.
Weijia Jiang and Scott McFarland, we thank you so very much. With just a few weeks into the new year, members of the House Republican Conference, well, they're learning how to navigate the perks and pitfalls of being in the majority. I will speak to a freshman moderate Republican about everything, from the debt ceiling to George Santos. That's next. You are streaming Red and Blue, reporting across the political divide.
Original documentary from CBS reports tensions rising between a powerful country and a vital island.
The supply of this technology came grinding to a halt. The world would grind to a halt.
Absolutely. As Taiwan faces threats and aggression,
Taiwan is on the front line, and we understand our responsibility as a democracy. We cannot fall.
CBS News examines whether they can defend themselves.
Putin, Ukraine, China, Taiwan, they are manifestations of the battle between autocracy and democracy. And that is a fight that we're all engaged in.
Defending Taiwan, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
When weather turns extreme,
States from the plains to the northeast are bracing for more than 2 feet of heavy snow.
every second counts.
This is a monster winter storm.
CBS News and the Weather Channel bring you virtual weather technology so advanced, so real.
There's a wrinkle in the forecast, the accumulating ice.
You'll have time to get prepared.
Take precautions before you head out.
Feel the forecast on the CBS Evening News with Nora O'Donnell.
Stories that inform.
You can be really old at 60, and you can be really young at 85.
Inspire.
How do we unlock the power within ourselves to be who we want to be?
And brighten your day.
The best part of fame is making people feel good. Always send the people home happy.
Make every day a little more like Sunday morning.
Here comes the sun.
Stream now on the free CBS News app.
An original documentary from CBS reports.
The carnage in our nation's schools has become painfully repetitive.
Not one more child!
School shootings have parents fighting mad.
I promised my daughter I was going to fight. It's going to keep on happening.
And teachers taking lessons in how to fight back.
This is an exercise.
We approach it as it's you or them.
It shouldn't have to be your teacher's job to protect your life.
But will the battle over gun control
People are afraid that they're going to lose their gun rights altogether.
be the hardest lesson of all?
The exercise, you're having to shoot at an adult. Are you prepared to have to kill one of your students?
Guns in the Classroom, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Welcome back to Red and Blue. I am Major Garrett. After the U.S. hit the debt ceiling last Thursday, House Republicans and the White House have been on something approaching a standoff over what exactly should happen next. House Speaker Kevin McCarthy and the Republicans have said the White House should negotiate in some manner or form to reduce spending in the future before the debt ceiling is raised. The White House has said, no, that's not going to happen. They don't want any negotiations or any conditions. What they want instead is to cleanly increase the debt limit. New York Republican Congressman Mike Lawler, representing the Empire State's 17th District, joins us now. Congressman, it's good to see you. It's been a dramatic month for you in your first term in Congress. You have, or had, a cliffhanger vote for Speaker, the serial embellishments of colleague George Santos, and a roiling document scandal involving the President of the United States. Summarize your first couple of weeks here in Washington.
Well, as I've said, you know, politics ain't beanbag, and certainly Washington has proven that over the last few weeks. It's certainly been an interesting start to the 118th Congress, but you know, I've been around politics a long time, and this certainly doesn't shock me by any stretch.
So one of the big issues that's going to confront the Congress later this year is raising the debt ceiling. Briefly stated, Congressman Lawler, what are your demands for a yes vote to increase the debt ceiling for the United States government?
Well, it's not a function of demand, but there needs to be a good faith negotiation. And I think the White House needs to recognize that they are no longer in control of Washington with one party rule. The voters wanted a balance and common sense restored. And the bottom line is we cannot continue to incur debt at the levels that we have. And while we absolutely must pay our debt previously incurred, and so we will raise the debt ceiling, there needs to be a good faith negotiation and an understanding that this cannot continue. And so I think the White House needs to recognize that. They are not going to be able to circumvent the speaker on this. And we need to work together to address these challenges.
What to you, Congressman, would be a suitable outcome of those negotiations?
I think we need to have a serious conversation about how we curtail spending. We cannot continue to spend at the levels that we have, print new money at the levels that we have, and borrow at the levels that we have. And so I think as long as there is an honest, good faith effort in advance of the budget process to really start reining in spending, I absolutely will vote to increase the debt ceiling. We have to pay our debts already incurred. We have an obligation to do that. But I think for the White House to just blanketly reject any common sense conversations here with respect to spending is wrong.
Another issue that's going to come before the House Republican majority sooner than that is immigration. It could come up in the next couple of weeks. Chip Roy, one of your colleagues, whom I'm sure you got a chance to meet during that dramatic cliffhanger vote for the new Speaker of the 118th Congress, has a bill that some moderate Republicans allege would effectively end the asylum process in our country. Are you in favor of Chip Roy's legislation? Where do you stand on that question?
No, obviously, we need to have an asylum process. And look, my wife is an immigrant from Eastern Europe. She came here, earned her citizenship. And so I've been through the immigration process, and it's a broken one. We absolutely need to secure our border. We cannot continue to have tens of thousands of migrants coming into our country illegally. But we need to increase not only Border Patrol, but court personnel, because you need to hear these asylum cases in an expeditious manner. It should not be taking 2 to 3 years to go through that process. But I'm not in favor of completely eliminating asylum. Immigrants enrich our community, our culture, our economy. But there needs to be a legal process by which we follow, and it needs to be done orderly. And I think, obviously, this is a broken system. And so I will work with colleagues on both sides of the aisle because it really does require a bipartisan solution. We're not going to be able to just do this through, by one party, and you're certainly not going to be able to do it by eliminating asylum.
Right. And just to be clear, if Chip Roy's legislation as written were to come to the floor, you would vote against it?
As written, I would vote no.
Understood. What are your current thoughts, Congressman Lawler, on the ongoing, seemingly never-ending George Santos scandal? I know you've called for his resignation. That doesn't appear to be something he's heeding. Where does this head, and where does it end?
Well, as I've said, this is embarrassing and unbecoming. And I think certainly, he should really listen to the words of not me, but his constituents and the elected officials in his own community, including in the Republican Party, who have called for him to resign. I don't think anything is going to happen, though, until you get these investigations to come back. And so, once there's investigations and he's had the ability to cooperate with those investigations, which he should, then we'll see, what comes of it.
Congressman, is there any doubt in your mind he was elected under false pretenses?
Well, I think it's very clear that he misled voters in his district, that they voted for him in part based on his resume and his background in finance that he claimed. And so certainly I can see how people would be very upset about the fact that they voted for him under false pretense.
I would imagine, Congressman, you're a somewhat avid reader of the New York Times. On Sunday, Maureen Dowd's column talked about her session with Speaker Pelosi, Nancy Pelosi. In that column, Speaker Pelosi mentioned that Democrat Governor Kathy Hochul misread the crime issue, identifying it as something that was politically perilous 7 to 10 days before election. Pelosi saying the governor and other Democrats should have done so sooner. What's your response to that observation?
I think the former speaker is a pretty astute politician. She didn't stay in power for 20 years for nothing. But I think, it wasn't just Kathy Hochul that misread the situation. Frankly, Sean Maloney misread it. He said 4 years prior that enacting cashless bail was his top priority. His own words came back to bite him in the election, and voters rejected it. But certainly Kathy Hochul and Democrats in Albany and New York City have definitely misread the crime issue and frankly, have not learned anything from the election because they continue to double down on it.
What will you do, and what can this Republican majority in the House do to alter either the trajectory of the crime debate or its lived reality for communities such as yours?
Well, listen, I represent a district where 50% of households have a cop, a firefighter, a veteran, or a first responder. Many of my constituents deal with this reality every day, working especially in New York City. And so this is serious, and it requires New York State to take action. And in the absence of that, the federal government to intervene, because our number one responsibility as a government is to ensure the public safety. And so if we need to use the power of the purse to force change in New York, so be it, because this is unsustainable to continue to have the levels of crime that we've had and this cashless bail law, where 40% of those arrested for felony offenses have been rearrested while those charges are pending. That's unsustainable.
When you defeat the sitting chairman of the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee, you draw attention in Washington. Mike Lawler did. Congressman, it's been a pleasure. Thank you, sir.
Thanks for having me.
The political world is waiting for President Biden to make a decision about whether or not he'll run for re-election. And if he does, he'll need to keep progressives in his party happy. What a key Bernie Sanders ally thinks about that next. You are streaming Red and Blue.
Original CBS Reports documentary.
Yoga and wellness has become a place of anti-science.
Online clickbait.
The algorithms feed you content based upon your own fantasy.
Potentially at my peril.
There's no question about it.
Spreading digital disinformation.
Their entire yoga studio and spiritual community got so embedded in all of the QAnon stuff that it became this sick place.
Why pro-health people are fertile ground for anti-science messages.
We can just go into the whole mask thing. A lot of us just believe that's symbolism for silencing people.
People are locked in this mindset. They've been taught to accept what the medical doctors say.
No longer are you going to be willing to take any medical advice.
It's a big problem that we urgently need to address.
An original CBS Reports documentary streaming now. An original CBS Reports documentary.
We need to put an end to this territorial status.
Will statehood create a better Puerto Rico?
So that we have the same quality of life that you see in the States.
What do you worry about?
Me living here in the future.
They're giving incentives to non-Puerto Ricans to come to Puerto Rico
and extract our natural resources and take over our land.
Vacation in Puerto Rico, and in exchange for that, you don't pay taxes.
Why would I allow somebody who abused me for 123 years to then consume me?
An original CBS Reports documentary streaming now. People from every corner of America facing challenges.
Everyone is just looking for some type of connection.
Just raise your hand and say, hey, I'd like to help.
Coming together to find solutions.
We are going to do something about it.
Their stories are our stories.
Welcome to Eye on America.
Stream now on the free CBS News app.
After decades in the public eye and public service, this mother-daughter duo is now talking about gutsy women. What's the gutsiest thing you've ever done? We go person to person with Secretary Hillary Rodham Clinton and Chelsea Clinton.
Now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Stories that inform, inspire, and brighten your day.
The best part of fame is making people feel good.
Make every day a little more like Sunday morning.
Here comes the sun.
Stream now on the free CBS News app.
Welcome back to Red and Blue. I am Major Garrett. With the 2024 presidential election just about a year and a half away, Democratic and Republican Party members are considering who should be nominated. CBS News Chief Election and Campaign Correspondent Robert Costa joins us here in D.C. with more. Robert, you talked to Ro Khanna today. For those of us who remember the 2020 campaign, he was an avid supporter of Bernie Sanders. And you asked him whether or not President Biden, should he announce for re-election, will face a progressive challenger. Let's take a listen.
If he runs, do you believe there's any chance he could face a progressive challenger?
I mean, obviously, it's an open election. People are always going to run. There are always usually 50 to 100 candidates. Do I think that he's going to face a serious challenge? No, I don't.
Senator Bernie Sanders, I recently covered him as he gave a speech on the state of the working class. He doesn't seem to be angling for any kind of primary challenge in any way. Is that your assessment of where Sanders is as well?
Yes. You know, one of the things that Sanders got an unfair rap on in both 2016 and 2020 is somehow he wasn't a team player or a good Democrat. Senator Sanders, at the end of the day, cares deeply about the Democratic Party and the cause, and has been a great team player, actually, since President Biden's election. And I know that he's not going to go challenge President Biden.
So, Bob, after the Sunday shows this week in Washington, it's not really on the progressive left that there are questions about anyone who might challenge President Biden. It's Joe Manchin.
Exactly right, Major. It's intriguing that someone who was co-chair of Bernie Sanders' 2020 presidential campaign is saying that he does not expect any serious challenge from the left should President Biden seek re-election. He believes Sanders wouldn't do it. Ro Khanna has been mentioned as someone himself who has potential presidential ambitions. He has said he would get behind Biden. But when I asked him about Manchin, could a business-friendly centrist Democrat get in the race? He said he did not rule it out. It should not be ruled out. Very interesting answer that Biden now, when you look at the Sunday shows, facing criticism about his handling of the documents, not from progressives, but from more traditional Democrats.
Another race that's gathering a lot of attention this morning. It gathered a little bit of attention early last week when news broke by CBS and others. Ruben Gallego is going to run for the Democratic nomination for the Senate in Arizona. He put up an ad this morning, a digital ad. Let's take a look at it.
If you're more likely to be meeting with the powerful than the powerless, you're doing this job incorrectly. I'm sorry that politicians have let you down, but I'm going to change that. I'm Ruben Gallego. I'm running to be the senator of Arizona.
Nothing more common in Washington, Bob, than for one politician to say other politicians have let people down.
And this is not going to be a usual race in Arizona. You're looking at someone in Senator Sinema, Kyrsten Sinema, who is now an independent. She used to be with the Democrats. So if Gallego gets into this race, he's now in the race. Does that mean it splits the Democratic vote, the independent left-leaning vote, and does that pave the way for a Republican? Maybe former Governor Doug Ducey gets into the Senate race. I'm sure Mitch McConnell would like to see that for Senate Republicans. Gallego's entry is not surprising. He sat down with CBS News recently for a long interview. He's been moving towards this race for a long time. But it's hard to read the politics of Arizona at this exact moment. Could Gallego unite Democrats around him and try to just box out Sinema and make her compete for the Republican vote versus the Democratic vote? It all remains to be seen.
And one of the things that keeps this conversation very lively is we don't know, do we, exactly what Kyrsten Sinema's intentions are.
That's right. She has not made clear that she's running for re-election. It's expected because she moved to be an independent that she's going to try to avoid a Democratic primary. It's very obvious that when you become an independent, you're removing yourself from the party structure that might try to get you out of the nomination. So she will make her decision in time. I would expect her, based on my conversations with her colleagues in recent weeks, that she would run as an independent, and she's going to hope that the Democrats on the donor level don't throw enormous amounts of money behind Congressman Gallego.
Bob Costa, thank you so very much. That does it for today. You can stream Red and Blue Monday to Thursday at 5 p.m. Eastern. And here's a very friendly reminder. If you want to watch previous episodes of the program, you can see them anytime on the CBS News website. All you have to do is go to cbsnews.com/red and blue.
Everybody wakes up in the morning and they are pelted with alerts that frighten them, news that agitates them. With this show, we have the time to explain what's going on. These migrants, they've been released. Explain the status that allows them to be released, to slow things down a little bit. What are the big sets of questions for China and its ambitions? Hackers are stepping up their attacks to extort victims. Let's start with easy. Who's attacking? Here's a deeper understanding of what's happening.
Prime Time with John Dickerson. Stream on the free CBS News app.
You ready?
A generation of kids opens up on CBS Reports.
I just want to be like a regular kid.
Their world, their struggles, their voices.
What if I was white?
A lot of people like to call names and make you feel ashamed for being proud of who you are.
Now streaming Gender.
I did not realize that you